Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cosmic Owl Astrology. I am Louise Eddington, the Cyberpunk Witch Priestess to the Stars, thanks to Steve Judd. He called me that. Anyway, before I introduce my guest today, I just want to remind you that on December the 13th, I am doing a webinar for Kepler College on Series. And so the link's below, and it's a free webinar. So I hope you'll join me, or at least register for the recording. But with me today, I have Christa Hamilton. Christa was part of a group I was running for OPA, the Organization of Professional Astrology. And, you know, she works with a lot of different things to me, but we're both astrologers and we share a lot of the same interests, but you can't work with everything, right? But Christa's been a lifelong student of many esoteric subjects and a practitioner of divination. With a focus on astrology as the central core to her praxis, she blends many other modalities, including tarot, plant medicine, animal symbolism, and dream work. She's a graduate of the Nightlight Astrology School, founding member of the Asteri Sofia Kairos collective. I hope I said that all right. A contributing writer and lecturer for the Astrologers Co+Op and a volunteer for OPA. Christa works under her business name Practical Astros and focuses on one-on-one client readings. She also creates art, writes, makes videos, and collaborates with other astrologers to create practical astrology accessible to all. You also do classes, though, so you need to add that in there. So,
I do,
anyway, yeah. And
doesn't
quite a
need
lot of
to
other
be too
things.
long-winded.
Yeah. So just tell people about how you got into astrology, first of all, if you would.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. And
Mhm.
I will start that I have a tiny screech owl that comes and lives at my house like twice a year. He
Oh.
perches in a tree outside of my bedroom,
Ooh.
and he returned this morning, which I thought was
Oh,
very
wow.
auspicious to do the cosmic
Oh,
owl. He's incredibly cute. He's only like this big, but he has a pretty
yeah.
grand presence. So I thought it was a nice little
Oh,
omen. Um,
there you go.
yeah, yeah. So I have just been curious about esoteric things. I grew up in a very fundamentalist Christian home, and so just that created um, the space to be curious about really anything that seemed dark. I was always just really
Mhm.
fascinated with things that were kept from me, things that were mysterious, and just I'm a curious person. I was born in the year of
Mm.
the monkey, and all other monkeys I've met have always just been like curious to a fault. Like that's usually probably what kills us. It's just being too curious. And I just like to lift up rocks and see if there's scorpions or snakes or worms underneath. That's just kind of my mo.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
astrology was one of subjects that I found mostly in charity shops or thrift stores.
Mm.
I was born in 1980, and so in the early mid 90s, I went to thrift stores to buy records, to buy vinyl and 8 tracks because I had an 8 track player, and I just loved old things, and that
Mhm.
included books, and a lot of the really cool old books were astrology books. And so my
Mm.
first astrology book was Linda Goodman's Sun Signs. And
I can see my copy from here.
yeah, I still have my original copy, and it's so
Mhm.
funny because I will pick it up and read it now. She has Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland quotes, for each of
Mm.
like the descriptors of like the Taurus child or the Aries man and that sort of a
I
thing.
had forgotten about that. Oh,
Well, the Aries
yeah.
one is funny because there's a quote about Alice says, I think I've believed 6 impossible things before breakfast. And I still think about those quotes related
Mm.
to Aries. Um, so
Mm.
that's pretty much, I just found books and knew that they
Mm.
were kind of forbidden. And so I was just naturally drawn to it. And I just kept that very close to the chest and didn't really talk to people about it. Just, I liked it. I like to keep it secret. I liked it for myself. And then
Mm.
just did that, kind of secretly studied astrology, mostly astrology, and like numerology and animal symbolism and that sort of stuff. I got into herbalism when I was a late teenager. I've always been a gardener. I've always liked to grow plants, make
Mm.
daisy crowns and stuff like that. So It wasn't really until I was about to hit my first Saturn return that I worked with a astrologer at a grocery store. His name is Kelly Lee Phipps, and he was an
Oh,
astrologer. And I
no longer
adored,
with us, but a great astrologer.
yeah, he trying to describe Kelly is you just fall short unless you've met him in person because he was just ridiculous.
Mm,
And he was just over the top, very joyful. And I was close with his son and him. They lived next to the grocery store that I worked at, and so I learned so much
mm,
astrology, and it really reinvigorated astrology for me by learning from Kelly. I was
mm,
the book buyer at that grocery store, and so I started to just scour Llewellyn and all these book suppliers. And so I just brought in as many astrology books as he recommended. And we
mm,
ended up for a grocery store having this really eclectic library of astrology and esoteric texts. And so from that, I just accelerated and started to realize that I could talk to other people about astrology.
mm,
And that was in 2005, 2006. But then it didn't become more of a practice until 2018. And
mm.
as an astrologer, I look back on it and it's the Uranus half return. So I had Uranus going through my seventh house, and I have
Yeah.
four planets in Taurus. And so it was just pinging all of those planets and really liberating me from this version of myself that I developed. And it was
Mm,
just part of the process of growth. And so
mm,
from that, I started to just expand and read about all sorts of astrology, and really was kind of
mm.
lost at the amount of astrology that was out there. I didn't know there was astrological community. That was like the
Oh,
first big,
I didn't. I had no idea
yeah,
about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it makes sense if you think about it, but I didn't, realize that there was like groups of people that would get together and talk, and that there was like in the MySpace days that there was like MySpace, groups, and
Mm.
it was
And
really from
that
that.
there's different kinds of astrology, you know.
Right. I didn't
Yeah.
know, I had zero idea even what
Mhm.
like Hellenistic astrology was. I knew that
Mm,
there was Indian astrology,
mm,
and I knew that there was ways of looking at interpreting the sky, like,
mm,
Mayan stargazing and indigenous
mm,
peoples of Americas, that their interpretations of things were
mm.
different. But I didn't really like think about it any more than that. So
Yeah.
it just really opened up a vast, endless, actually,
Oh, it's totally
overwhelming.
endless. It's
Yeah.
it's so endless. But that's one thing my Gemini moon loves about astrology because there's always more to learn every day. So,
Yeah. And I
hmm
liken it to
hmm
just life. Like you can't
mm,
experience everything in this life. And
hmm
there's no reason to try except to just try the ones that bring you joy and that you're attracted to.
hmm
And that's enough. That's too
yeah,
much as it is.
yeah.
So yeah.
And
That
and you're an astrologer like me who's really working to integrate all of our kind of passions and
mhm.
interests into our work rather than just be an astrologer. And it's kind of really difficult to say who you are when you tell people what you do because of that.
Yeah.
I think we're all working on that. But anyway, you don't have to try and nail that down right now. But
Yeah, it's like my husband's a musician, and people are like, well, what kind of music? And it's just easier to
mm,
say rock and roll. It's just
yeah,
easier because it's
yeah.
like, but it's like this and it's like this.
Mm,
But depending on what other that person's perspective of what rock and roll is, that
mm,
influences their interpretation of what kind of music. And so when you say astrologer, most
hmm
people, I have a hard time telling people I'm an astrologer, depending on the
mm,
context, mostly because I'm protective of it. I hold it really
mm,
seriously. It's a serious subject for me. It is my
hmm
ethos. It's my faith in a certain, it's like how
hmm
I really hold it sacredly. And I don't
mm.
appreciate the eye rolling. And so I just kind of keep it to myself for the most part.
Yeah,
Um,
I did at first, but we have very different charts. So
yeah. Yeah.
I now like to look people in the eye and challenge them to kind
Hmm.
of really, as I say it, and that's my rebel. So there you go.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but
I mean, I will
mhm,
say it, but it's
mhm,
not by default.
mm,
I'm careful. I'm still careful about kind of who I share it with. And again, that is a
yeah,
reflection of my chart.
yeah, and
Yeah.
well, yeah. It is totally. I'm not going to talk what your chart is, but I know it. So
Yeah.
yeah. So, but it's kind of funny for me because my husband, we live in Utah with, and you're from a fundamentalist background, and I live amongst the Mormons. So my husband works in a company with mostly Mormons, and
Yeah.
so in a work do occasionally, you'll get some big old white guy coming up to me going, "What do you do?" And they're just totally gobsmacked. They don't know what to say. So I
Yeah.
tell them, yeah, it's
Yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah. I
But
mean, it's
anyway.
like, it's in a way easier than telling people I'm a witch, because then
Mhm.
they get really stunned, but that's ultimately what I am. I mean, I work
Yeah.
with plant medicine. I gather
Mhm.
plants. I make medicine for my family.
Mhm.
I divine omens, and I operate within kind of a divinatory life.
Yeah,
And that's a witch,
it is. It
full
is.
stop. That's a witch.
A witch is basically an alchemist and who
Yeah.
pulls it all together. So,
Yeah.
but the Decans, how did you get into that? And tell the listeners. I know what they are clearly, but not everybody might. So I know you work with them a lot. So you
I
give me
do. Yeah.
your version of what they are.
Well, the decans are a way to subdivide the entire sky. So if you think of the sky as like
Mm.
a 360-degree circle, there's 12 signs, and each sign holds a different section of the sky. Like, not all the constellations are the same size. So it's a way to just divide it evenly by 12. And then
Mm.
within each sign, you can divide each sign by 3. So then you get 10 degrees for each sign. So that's 30 degrees times 12 is 360.
Mm.
And the Decans I came to from Tarot. So
Mm.
Tarot was also a kind of a more of a hobby. I was just interested in the images of cards, but didn't really understand
Mm.
Tarot. And I didn't really take Tarot as a divinatory practice until the last couple of years, really. And
Mm.
then when I learned and realized and integrated the connection between Tarot and astrology, that was really when I felt like I anchored my practice. And if you think of like
Mm.
weaving, if you have single threads that are running one direction, it's not anchored in any way. It's kind of loose. But if you have another
Mm.
set of threads that crosses it and weaves it, it holds that tapestry. There's a tension there. And
Mm.
so each of the Tarot images, and when I say Tarot, I'm speaking of kind of the old school Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Um,
Well,
but
I use the Thoth deck or Thoth,
yeah,
whichever, however you say it.
yeah,
But they're the two original main decks.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. I
So
mean,
yeah.
cartomancy, the
Hmm.
use of like pulling a card with
Hmm.
an image on it, is very old,
Oh,
but it's
yeah.
very old. But the Tarot that I practice is based on the Thoth or the Rider-Waite-Smith,
Mm.
kind of that
Hmm.
era of cartomancy. And
Mm.
so each of the minor arcana, so there's numbered cards, there's 2 through 10 of all the suits, and the suits are cups, which corresponds to water, wands, which corresponds to fire, swords, which corresponds to air, and coins or pentacles or discs, which corresponds to earth.
Hmm.
So you have 2 through
Hmm.
10 of all those. Each of those cards has a decan. It basically lives in the spot in the zodiac. So, like,
I'm looking for my book. I wrote a book on tarot and astrology that gives, oh, here it is, breaks all those bits down. Anyway,
yeah,
if
yeah.
anybody wants it, yeah, but you explain it though. I'm not saying don't keep
No,
going.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's such a
Mm.
relationship. There's like a sisterhood between
Mm.
tarot and astrology, and this kind of, I think, is the key that most people that you can, if you practice tarot, it helps you learn a little bit about astrology. If you practice astrology, it helps you learn a little bit about tarot. And that
Mm.
was when I started to focus on the decans. It was more like I was drawn into them like a siren song. I was like, there's something
Mm.
about the decans. They're alluring. They feel incredibly mystical, and I think it's because that relationship that it like pulls tarot people and astrology people together through this
Mm.
avenue, this channel.
Mm.
And then there's the major arcana. Arcana means secret, so it's like the bigger secrets of life is like the major arcana.
Mm.
That's the cards that people mostly know, like the Fool, which I pulled the Fool card today, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
The Empress, the Tower, the Star, the Wheel of Fortune. Those cards are the major arcana, and then the minor arcana are the 2, 3, 4, etc. of all the suits. And all
Mm.
the majors have an association to a sign, or a planet or an element. But the minors is really where it's like the rubber meets the road. This is like the stories that we experience in our life we can find through the tarot or that little sliver of the chart. So decan just means tenths or 10. Mm-hmm. And so it's just the 10 degrees within each sign. And just to make it easy to kind of, fit mathematically, but they're not simple. They fit very mathematically, but they're not a simple thing at all. Does that explain it?
Oh yeah, it does. But the main thing about becoming a really good professional astrologer is the blending of everything. Mm-hmm. So it's another thing to blend, just like I bring in all the asteroids and, all the other things that also, they've called me in as well, like a siren song. I love how you say that. Yeah. I don't start using something until it calls me in. I don't do it just for the sake of it. So, but there are different, I hate the term rulership, but I'm going to use it anyway. There are different decan rulers. So I'm going to share the transits currently.
Yeah.
And this is what Astro Gold, my software, uses. So this uses like it does use Pluto and the outer planets and things. Mm-hmm. But there's also the traditional Chaldean rulerships that just goes up to Saturn, the traditional rulerships. Which one do you use?
I use the traditional, but I have an argument that there's no permanent ruler of a decan.
Yeah.
At all.
Or a sign, I think.
Yeah. It's like, but especially the decans, like where the decans reside in the wheel, if you think of the firmament that separates us in the earthly world and then the celestial spiritual realms, the decans are above the zodiac. So they're on this outer layer that is, in a way, it's outside of any rulership or ownership scheme. Now I follow the decan, the traditional decan ruler, where it's Aries 1. We start with Mars, and then by Chaldean rulership, you go all the way through, and we end at Pisces 3, which is the last sign of the last decan of the decan circle. It ends at Mars. And so I use those, but it's more about, to me, the decans are just about the story and who owns a story. And if we think of like oral history by nature is like circular time. It's not linear time. So there's no beginning or ending. There's no container for that story. It's whoever's telling the story. And that's kind of how I view it, is like the story that is kind of whistling through the doorway of that decan. It might be, the frame might be held by Venus. That Venus might be telling the story of Saturn, like it is in Aquarius 1, but she doesn't own it. It's like the reeds that are creating that song, but it's the story. The story is the decan power. It's not necessarily who is temporarily in that threshold. And I look at it as like thresholds. I mean, the Egyptians used decans as like a night clock. They would find the decan or the fixed star or constellation that was rising just before dawn, and they would be able to know, okay, this is kind of who's in power. And if someone had died, like the priest used to use it as like a way to usher that dead soul, being like, let's capture let's capture and honor this moment by this decan ruler by offering, food or wine or sigils or whatever it is on top of the coffin of the person who's passed, so that they have better luck passing through that firmament to go to the other worlds. And like, so that was fundamentally what they were used for, that we have record for. I mean, they could have been used for other things before that haven't survived the records, but it's like just that magical story that kind of passes through in the moment. And the Asteri Sofia Kairos collective I'm a part of, that Kairos word is key because it's about the opportunity. It's about the moment. It's not mechanical time. It's not chronos. It's like the chance. And we get so many chances. We get tons of chances. And it's like, if you capture the moment, then you have a better story to tell than
I
if it
love
goes past, you know?
I love the concept of Kairos time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah. I've done whole weekend Kairos workshops. So.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's so
Hmm.
beautiful. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And you know, I in my opinion, science is realizing now that we're actually in Kairos time. We're not really in
mm,
Chronos time at all. That's just what we make up to make the world make sense. But anyway,
yeah.
that's a
And have
whole.
control and have rulers and all those things. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, how do you work with the Decans with a one-on-one client, for example?
Well, it depends on where the client's at. And that's kind of
Mm.
just my, like, what are they coming to me for?
Yeah, I
And what
think
is
we
their,
all should be doing that. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I use the decans as like this subliminal layer, which is kind of um, where they are, you know, and
Mm.
they are parallel to the zodiac, but they're just below it. And that's kind of how I use decans is
Mm.
if a client comes in and they know exactly what they want to talk about, then great, you know,
Yeah.
we'll do
Yeah.
that. We'll
Exactly.
talk about that. But then within a reading, it always meanders, and and that's kind of the meandering. And like once people are comfortable, then they're, you know, most people come to an astrology reading because they're seeking something. And if they
Yeah.
don't get it in exactly the way that they want, that's when it's like wafting through. Um, Someone described it, The Cure, the band The Cure, and how they love their
Oh
music
yeah.
because it's like walking into a house and you hear there's music going and you kind of wander around and go up the stairs and then someone starts singing. It's not like they're singing right
Mm.
there at the gate. And to me, that's Decans. It's like they kind of lure you in and they're like, well, have you
Mm.
considered this story? And
Mm.
it's the story that I fall within. So like right now we're in a full moon, Gemini,
Mm-hmm.
and
Right on my moon, by the way.
oh, happy lunar return. So like
Oh.
right now, the moon is at 9 degrees, 43 minutes. The full moon will be in this middle decan of Gemini.
Mm-hmm.
But so the Gemini tarot cards, they look really, really difficult. Like you have um
Mm.
swords, you know, all the heirs are all swords, but the Gemini ones, it just looks like banishment from a kingdom and then just sitting in bed with all these swords hanging over your head. And then there's all these swords that are puncturing the back of the person. But it's also like the enlightenment from eating from the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden. It's that story too. It's like
Mm.
you had everything was kind of okay and all your needs were met, but then you discovered truth, and that enlightenment really is difficult. But like, would you give it up? Would you not
Mm.
want to have that enlightenment to then go on and find that stability later of the physical needs that you had in the garden? So if
Mm.
someone is having difficulty in that Gemini 1 placement, it's like what is difficult that you need to kind of find that realization. What have you
Mm.
just like been realized by? The transits usually will be like new things that come in. But I just
Mm.
talk about what is your forbidden fruit? What have you just eaten that is causing this discord? And it's usually like they may not be thinking about it directly, but it's that peripheral story that comes in that helps
Mm.
start to unfold things or unlock things. And to me, it's like finding compassion within your own story is like why I do astrology. It's like finding
Mm.
compassion for the self. I mean, I think that we want to find context within our own lives and choices and mistakes and successes, but ultimately
Uh-huh.
we just want to feel like we belong in it. And the
Yeah.
stories kind of can help lead us down the pathway to find that maybe we belong, or maybe there's something else that can lead me to something else. And to me, it's that that circular timing of storytelling that can help us get to that point eventually or get us near it.
Mm.
And just to be comfortable, you know, I have 4 placements in Taurus, so I want to be comfortable. I want you to be comfortable. And yeah, that's usually how I use it within a reading. It's not a direct,
Mm.
let's start at the decans. The other end
Yeah.
of it is because I work with a lot of astrology students. I really like people that are just into astrology. And usually it's overwhelmed. They're like, I need to know about zodiacal
Everything.
releasing and Fredaria and all this stuff. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah, maybe eventually in years
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But
I
it's
I
like,
feel no need to learn about either of those.
yeah,
You just can't know everything. That's my point. Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
you want to. That's the thing, is like you have this
Yeah.
desire to, like, when you realize that there's all these like really cool ways
Hmm.
to look at the same thing, it's fascinating, and you're just like, you're so hungry for it.
Yeah.
And with that's why I'm teaching the Decan class. It's like, here's a way that you can just start with this. Just start
Mm.
with like looking at these 36 cards, these 36 places,
Mm.
and really, since I use the traditional rulers, just look at these 7 planets and find these 7 planets within your own chart. What story is that one planet telling 6 times in your chart?
Yeah.
With Mars, it's 7 because there's a double one, but it's a way to kind of like calm down that frenzy, that mania of just wanting to like wood chip astrology information into your brain, because you don't really learn it. You're just
No, no,
you
you
just
don't.
you just get burnt out or
Yeah, you
overwhelmed,
have to.
overstimulated. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm not I shouldn't say that. I'm not a fan of thinking you can go and do like an astrology degree and know everything until you actually start working with it and practicing. Is
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
what where I was
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can have a good foundation, but until you start
Hmm.
putting it in practice, it doesn't mean
Hmm.
anything. It
No, it
really doesn't.
doesn't. No.
And that's like the Chronos time and the Kairos time. It's like,
Mm.
what good is a boundary of a limitation of time if you're not living within that?
Mm.
It needs to have soul. It can't just be. And that's also the power of story. You can memorize a table of data. It doesn't mean a
Mm.
damn thing if it doesn't make you respond emotionally.
Exactly.
If the story pisses you off or inspires you, or you become lustful
Hmm.
or antagonistic, whatever. If you have a response, you're going to remember that. You're not going to
Oh yeah.
remember a list of what the zodiacal releasing periods are for each of the planets. It does not help at all. So
It
yeah,
doesn't.
until you start reading for other people, that's when your astrology, that's
Hmm.
astrology school, is reading for your
It,
friends, reading for
I hear
strangers,
you.
blind reading for celebrities that never see it, but it's just it puts your muscles into that practice.
Mm. And I always encourage my actual clients, who I teach astrology, to go and do like those fast mini readings at psychic fairs to get
Mm-hmm.
over that fear of kind of doing things wrong. Because until you
Yeah.
just start letting the chart speak to you,
Mm-hmm.
then then you don't really embody it or
Yeah.
feel the astrology. So, I think every astrologer should work towards that. Obviously you have to start somewhere. So
Yeah.
you start by learning those keywords and you kind of do.
Yeah.
But then you bring it into practice. So I thought I would never remember everything. And just even like, you know, so-called rulerships and things, when I was learning it, there was so much to learn, but you soon do when you keep
Mm-hmm.
working with it every day, every
Yeah.
single day.
Yeah.
It's driving me nuts that my software, I can't find how to change it to the rulerships you do, because
Oh,
I just want to look at this full moon, if that's all right.
so if you right click on the chart, and it'll
Okay, hang
say
on.
rulerships. If you're using Astro
Mm.
Gold, it'll say
Oh,
rulerships, and
okay.
you go to traditional. It took me a really long time to figure that out, and it's so easy, but it was driving me nuts because I was
Why is
looking at
it?
all the wrong places. Yeah.
Yeah, let me share the chart then. And then, so if I click on it anywhere,
Yeah, click on it. Just right click on it.
that's
Control
control,
click. Yeah.
control, just click. Yeah. Oh,
And then rulerships.
oh, traditional. Oh my God, you've just changed my life. I always forget how to right click on a Mac too. I'm a
Yeah.
Mac girl. So here's the traditional rulership. So I'm just going to get to the exact moment of the full moon. And I don't expect you to do a full reading, but just to kind of demonstrate to people how you might, you've talked a bit about it, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but so people can see it as well. So the full moon is at 6:14 p.m. Eastern time. I always have my chart set to that at 13 Gemini. So the moon itself is in the Mars ruled Decan, and the sun is. Would you look at the sun as well on a full moon?
Yeah, I mean, I would look at any planet that wants to speak.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the sun casting its light on the moon, so I would definitely for a full moon, I would look at that.
Yeah, and especially when the sun is in the moon's decan too. So and it's square the nodes. Do you use the nodes because you're more of a traditional? Okay, so it's exactly square the nodes by minutes. Yeah. So the north node in the Pisces north node is in Jupiter's decan. Ooh, that's juicy. And the south node in Venus. So so just a few phrases maybe to kind of thread some of that together for people for this full moon generally.
So, you look at where the moon is, and looking at where the moon is in your own chart, you might see where a story is playing out. And because this moon in particular is that crossing of the nodes, like we're about halfway between eclipses at this point. So it's what is that eclipse story that's unfolding? Because this in particular feels like that, like a crossroads, like a fated crossroads moment, being right there with the nodes themselves are kind of in good places. Like the story they're telling, I think, is very hopeful and stable and successful. But where the sun and the moon are is difficult as far as the story. It's like, but that's usually when you change course, is when things get to a point where you're exhausted. You feel injured, you feel unsupported, you feel like you're just having to deal with one crisis after the other. And that's kind of where the moon is and the sun. The Rider-Waite-Smith cards for this are the 9 of swords and the 9 of wands. And both of these are like...
I actually pulled the 9 of swords for my week ahead forecast this week.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but so you look at them and the imagery is really difficult. And it doesn't mean that you're going to, the 9 of swords has a person sitting in bed with their hands over their eyes, and they have like swords just all above them. And it's like so many thoughts. If we think of words and swords kind of like interchangeably, it's like you have so many piercing thoughts just weighing on your mind. It's just overwhelmed. And that's kind of a Gemini moon is just overwhelmed with all the thoughts that just go and just fleeing around. And so it's just like, that is the difficulty. That is what propels us to then make it not be there. If the difficult moments, the difficult aspects, the difficult planets or transits, that to me, it's the sun highlighting all the thoughts. Like there's really, you're not missing anything with this full moon. All of it will be revealed and it'll be right there on the table. And how you choose to respond to that is up to you. But I would say, like, it's not necessarily like the easiest situation. And especially where the moon is in your chart might be highlighting not the easiest situation. But the good thing about this card is that what it shows is that, you're safe. You are taken care of. It really is up in your head. It's up to you to kind of sort it out, but you're not under attack by anything except your own mind. And how you choose to deal with that, again, is up to you. But it will propel change towards that beautiful story that the nodes are telling. So it's like, you're not going to make the wrong decision. You are headed in this really successful, comfortable pathway. But it's like right now, it's a lot, and everything is illuminated. The thing that I see with Gemini, especially this Gemini middle decan, is that as a distraction to not want to deal with what you're already thinking about is to seek out new information that might change the story. And it's like, you have all the information. Like, don't busy yourself with trying to change the story by seeking out more additional stuff. That's what Mercury just likes to gather.
Oh, yes.
It. So and that's the beauty about the Virgo middle one. It's like, I have all the information. Like, there's nothing new to add. The submissions deadline has closed. What you have is what you have, And I'm not necessarily saying it will be easy. You know, we think of Sag season as like frivolity and jolly and celebration,
Fun,
and everything
party.
fun. But this is a hard one. This is a hard one
Mm-hmm.
that will lead us to like sweetness. Like I really like
Mm.
where the nodes are. So
I
yeah,
do
that's
too, and I think it's a lot about change, shifting perceptions,
mhm.
you know, and so just so everybody knows, my moon is at 12 Gemini, and my Jupiter is at 14 Sag, and so
Oh,
I'm getting a major hit, and my moon is in the sixth house, and my sun is in the 12th. So there you go. This one is kind of like a complete crossroads for me. But
yeah.
to talk about what Christa said, so I hark it back to the particularly the lunar total eclipse on September the 7th.
Mm,
So of course it's the whole season, things, build. And I've changed, everything's changed.
hmm
I've got a new website, I've rebranded, I've done this, I've done that. And so this has been working us for a while,
Yeah.
especially those of us that have these major hits like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing is like nothing
Mm-hmm.
happens in a vacuum. This is
No,
all like none of this really should be a surprise. You know,
no.
this is not doom astrology to be like the shoe's going to drop, you know, today on the
Mm-hmm.
full moon. It's a matter of like things build gradually. And then after this, like when people watch this video, it will have already passed and it will be
Mm-hmm.
like disseminating. And so then
Yeah,
we get to decide where, you know, what pieces are we going to keep from the story and what pieces are we just going to throw in the bin. You know,
yeah.
we get to choose all that.
Mm-hmm.
That's up to us. To me, that choice is part of leading us to that really beautiful nodal story that the nodes share.
Mm. So when you, because I do, I look at the tarot and the astrology together as well, hence the
Mm-hmm.
book. But where do you not use reverse? Do you just always?
I don't necessarily take the meaning of the card and
Mm,
invert it.
mm,
If I have a reversal, I might treat it as
mm.
like a slowed down planet, a station planet, a retrograde planet, a story
Or
that might
I think of it as more inward as well if it's a reversed.
yeah,
But
yes.
yeah.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
get them that often. I shuffle them in a way that
Mm,
you know they don't get flipped. So when I do get
mm,
a flipped one, it stands out
mm,
because of the way that I shuffle. I don't
mm-hmm.
you know that doesn't happen, but I don't
Mm.
invert the meaning. But
No, I don't. Mm-mm.
I do use it in a way that makes me pause, and I'll bring up like it showed up reversed. So what is it about the story that maybe I need to like
Mm,
the hanged man or the hanged one or the martyr card is hanging
mm,
upside down and it's the elemental water card and it's like how can you look at the reflection of the story and so I kind of use
mm.
reversals with that
Yeah.
translation of like what is something maybe that I'm not seeing on first glance that I need to slow
Mm,
down and not just think about the way I usually think about it. It could just be this
yeah.
card might show up in a way that I'm not used to. And that happens all the time, all the time.
Yeah. And the astrology reflects that as well, with the fact that
Mm-hmm.
Mercury is only just station direct, and Mercury is, the ruler, so to speak, of Gemini and the
Mm-hmm.
South Node of kind of what we're letting go of, what we're
Yeah.
releasing. So, and Mercury is barely up to speed.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost there, but it's also heading behind the sun. So it's
Yeah.
to my mind, this is like as you described, a very inward, like things that have been chaotic, crazy, building that new story you've been writing since those eclipses. It's like you said,
Yeah.
what bits are you going to go? That's not working. Trash that one.
Yeah. That's the best
Mm-hmm.
thing about retrogrades is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, retrograde planets don't move backwards. Our perception of them
Mm.
changes.
Yeah.
And they when they slow down, it goes back to that weaving
Mm-hmm.
anecdote. It's like the slowing down helps us kind of weave it a little bit more because if we
Mm.
just went forward, we would just be those straight lines. We would have nothing to
Yeah.
anchor us. And like
Mm-hmm.
we slow down. We have days where you know I just don't have energy. I don't know why. I don't know why. I'm just not in the mood. I just need to slow
Exactly.
down. I need to sleep in. Why did I take a nap today? We don't always understand those things. Our body
Mm.
knows, and so our body makes us slow down. To me, that's like a retrograde. It's just
Mm-hmm.
thing I need to sort some things out. I need a sabbatical, or I need a day off, whatever it is. Like Jupiter is retrograde, and I'm excited for Jupiter being retrograde because it's going to
Me
be
too.
retrograde for a while. We get that slowed Cancerian Jupiter. Like, that's just the yummiest to me. I absolutely adore that one. So,
Yeah. And planets are generally closer to us when they're retrograde too. So that, the way my Gemini moon works, that's
mm,
also another sign that it's the slowing down, yes, but also that listening to that inner voice, going within, processing,
mhm,
making the space so you can do that. We're also busy out there, right? So
mhm.
yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, awesome. So you've really changed my life, being able to change the rulerships. So so when are you? So you run a Decans class, right? And
Yep.
so when are you running it again?
So it'll be the end of this month, December 29th. I'm doing a little mini class. So December
Hmm.
29th, January 5th, and January 12th. So it'll be 3 Mondays in a row. And that will be
Hmm.
recorded with little worksheets that are sent ahead of time. So it's really like an intro to the Decans. There'll be 90-minute classes. So it's, if you miss it, you can catch a recording. And then in the spring, I'm going to do a longer one that is both
More in
Decan work.
depth. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more in
Yeah.
depth because we're going to be looking at the Decans through our dreams. So it's
Mm.
also like a lucid dream instruction, and
Hmm.
like a dream collective. So doing these Decan walks together with people through workshop, through classes, but also how you can start to do a Decan walk through your dreams. Because I think that
Mm.
that's where the Decan imagery really can come to you if you are receptive to it, if you have the space
Mm.
to kind of create that. And so over 12 weeks, it'll be, meeting every 10 days, working with that Decan, sharing the
Mm.
dreams that we've had, doing these dream practices that I'll develop. And yeah, it's going to be way more in depth and like a real deep,
Mm.
a deep Deccan course. The one that's
Mm.
happening in December and January is more of like the intro to,
Hmm.
and then there'll probably be more next year, but those are the two ones that
Mm.
I'm developing now.
And
Yeah.
your website's Practical Astros, right?
Yeah.
I will put the link
Yeah.
in the description. And so, I if I had the time or the space, I would love to take your Decas course maybe one day, because
Yeah.
I've heard other people talk about the Decans, but I just love how you really tune into them and use the dream
Mm.
work and everything,
Yeah.
rather than just the words.
Yeah, it's not about the data.
Mhm.
The Decans
No.
are not to be contained. That's my
Mhm.
I feel like I was put
Mhm.
on earth to be an advocate for liberating the Decans into the
Mm.
stories, because if we think of books and ancient texts, those are just ossified conversations that a human had with the divine messages,
Mhm.
and we
Mhm.
have just as much right and ability to divine those messages ourselves.
We
And the
do.
Decans are a way to kind of enter that space. You don't have to do it to publish a book or do it to
No.
create an ancient text for the future, but you can be taught how to communicate kind of with your daimon, your lot of spirit, your other angels that are with you, your ancestors, your dream allies, your animal familiars, like that's sitting in your lap. I mean, all these things you
Mhm.
can do it through the gateway of the Deccan. Again, it's the
Yeah.
story. It's not necessarily just the container or the exact, Orphic hymn that you sing. It's not
Mm.
about that. It's not about getting it right in the Chronos way. It's about getting it right in the
No.
Kairos way. And the Decans are
Mhm.
just like, I proselytize for them because I
Mm.
feel like it's like, to me, it's like, it's the key. It's totally the
Mm.
key.
Well, now I know how to change that outer wheel. I can see that. I probably won't use them in my consultations,
Yeah.
at least at this point, but I probably will look at them
Yeah.
when I'm tuning into a person's chart, to just add another layer to the story, because
Yeah.
at this point, I know how to kind of blend the imagery and feeling. But no, this has been really interesting. And I hope some people will be, well, go and follow Christa, Practical Astros, the website, YouTube.
Yeah, I do YouTube and Instagram and Substack, and those are the ones I'm most active on. I have Facebook and TikTok, but I'm not as active on those. But I write on Substack. I do YouTube videos. I had a whole series talking to other astrologers about the Decans. I found ones that were qualified enough to have enough in their own placement so that their story could be told through. So I did that. And yeah, I'm if you go to my website, you can find the link to the workshop, and then all of my links to all of my other socials. So yeah.
And isn't it kind of funny that Christa picked this day and time on this full moon, and just how it speaks to my chart? Just so obviously I was meant to kind of just understand Decans at a deeper level. So
timing's everything.
It always is. But that's how Kairos time works for me, because I don't do what's called electional astrology, where people go through all these degrees and dates and void moons and all this. I just choose a timing for a workshop or whatever, anything, and it's always perfect.
Yeah, that's the thing. And people wonder if like celebrities have astrologers, or like they must have astrologers because they chose this time. It's like, well, I mean, that happens to all of us. Like the timing of our chart kind of directs us in some ways. And we can retrospectively look and be like, it could have only happened at that time. Exactly. And maybe if I had tried to elect it, it would not have happened. I like electional astrology. I've used it when making plant medicine, but I
think it's useful for things like that.
But I'm not hemmed in. I have Uranus in the first house. Actually, Mercury is right on my Uranus, so I can't be hemmed in by some other body's rules at all. And so I like electional, but I don't use it as the filter by which I elect or post everything. If I have a video ready and it's edited and I need to go do something, I'll just post it and I'll look at the chart and be like, oh, that'll be interesting. Let's see what happens.
Yes. I just post them when I'm ready. Life always works out. But then again, I am Jupiter's daughter. So, so. But
that's why we love you, Louise.
Yes. Oh, well, I love you guys. It was such a wonderful group that we had. We spent 6 months together with a monthly call, and they feel like my babies because it was my first group taking them through this practice for OPA. And so you'll always be my kind of special little group. So
we're the oldest child. Yeah. Louise's mentorship, your mentorship was really, I was inspired to join it after talking with Mandy. She did an interview. She interviewed you for the OPA business conference. And then she texted me and she was like, you have to do this. I'm going to do this. And she like just described you. And I was like, that meme, like, take my money. It was just like, I just want to immediately book. And I did. I think I booked that day. And it was way more than I thought it would be. And I, again, didn't think that much of it before I booked it. But then you see mentorships and you see like being guided by somebody. The way you did it is authentic. It's honest. It's not checking off a box. It's like kind of sitting to see where each of us were at. And then you just had these really kind of no bullshit feedback to us. You're like, what about if you tried it this way? Maybe it wouldn't be so difficult. But also just the meditations that you led were really inspiring. Hi, Kitty.
That's
and
Luna.
She's just like, I'm fanning your flames and she's fanning your flames too.
Yes.
It was just a really inspiring mentorship. So I'm glad to have done it.
Well, thank you for that. I am running another one, by the way, next year. You can find it on the OPA website, opaastrology.org. But so, there's limited space in these because they're small group and very intimate. And I always like to add the extra space of a space, a community space for recordings and things like that. So it just creates more intimacy. But anyway, that's how I work. So, but I'm really glad you came on though, Christa, and I really hope people will check your website out, check your Decans course and your other work, because
Yeah.
I really like the way you work, and I'm glad that you're in a space right now. I'm not going to give the personal details,
Mm.
where you've got the time and space to really kind of focus on growing your practice and putting it out there in the world. So,
Yeah, same.
mm,
It's scary, but Venus favors the bold, and I'm a daughter of Venus for sure.
yeah. And there she is, right on that south node
Yeah.
in the Decan,
Yep.
Venus. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for coming on. I'll let
Thanks,
you have the
Louise.
recording when we're done. Bye.
Okay. Awesome. Bye.